All right, today is Saturday, March 21st, and we're continuing with our interview with Leo and Tineke Vroman, my parents.
We were at a point where I was leaving Manila on a big ship, of course, with about 8 or 9 other ex-POWs, one of which fell in love with a nurse on board already. We had the honor of occupying the officers' cabins. Well, we arrived in San Francisco, and maybe typically for California, we all went into stores and came out with a date. It was almost Christmas, and people felt we should be treated. I was allocated with a Norwegian man and his mother, and he wanted to know everything, and his reaction was usually "son of a gun." I could say anything like, he would ask me, well, what was the food? I said, well, mostly rice, son of a gun, and stuff like that. After a few days, we were put on a train to Chicago, and from there to New York, and put in a hotel. And to make a long story short, I visited my Uncle Snapper, who was now in New York. And he said, well, of course you should stay here because there's no work in Holland. So I said, how about my fiancée? And he said, your fiancée? When did you see her last? I said, 6 years ago. So he laughed and he said, there's so many nice girls in America, of which he knew quite a few. But that was not for me, and I have to make this awful decision of not going back to Holland. I should add that I have been accused of being too relaxed as a prisoner of war. I had paper and a pencil and I could write. I wrote a short novel, a long novel, and a lot of poetry, and it was because none of it was my fault. I mean, the horrible decision to escape was very hard on me and got harder the more successful it was. But from then on, nothing was my fault, and now I was going back to Holland. And now, again, it was my fault for not going, which was a very hard decision to make. But I stayed. I first made some money illustrating books and stuff like that, and my same Uncle Snapper, who gave me every job I had in the world, I found a colleague of his in New Brunswick, New Jersey, who needed somebody because he had a theory and he wanted to have some research done.
Can I back up a second to the books that you illustrated?
One was about atomic energy, atomic bombs.
Oh, really? Do you know what happened to those books? Are they still around?
I had a copy of it, but what I did was I had an agent, and to illustrate how the reactors were put together, I used mice putting the rods in and out and that sort of stuff. And I got in arguments, of course, with the editor, but the writer, the author, liked it, so that's what we did. Mm-hmm. So I went to New Brunswick. Well, first I met this doctor who was Dr. Moulton, a pathologist, who had found that during the war, during an autopsy, that the spleen contains a hormone that depresses your platelets count or function. So being paid only for your analysis routines in the morning and doing research free of charge in the afternoon, I started extracting spleens and following his recipe, getting nice white crystals and injecting them into a rabbit with absolutely no effect. And by that time, Tineke was ready to come.
Well, yeah. What was happening during that period? You had resumed university.
You had already
Yeah, we
washed the
had,
curtains.
yeah, because this was, I was back at the university. They opened up, well, as soon as the war was
Mhm.
officially over. We were planning for Daddy to come and to get married as soon as possible after that. In those days, I know it's no longer the case, Dutch people had to have permission from their parents to get married up to the age of 30. Well, I was not 30, I was about 24 or something.
Was that men and women needed permission?
Yes.
Well, Leo was free and his parents were not available anyway. So my poor father went to a notary in Indonesia and sent me a letter of approval. And then we had decided that we would live, our own room would be the attic room where my brother had been in hiding. And so I washed the curtains and I figured out where the bed would be and all that kind of thing. And I really was expecting him to come around the corner because these trips from America to Holland, they were something that was arranged spur of the moment. And then I got this letter from Leo that said, "Great news, I'm staying." I didn't think it was all that great.
Mm.
He thought that way I would see the positive side, and he thought that it was going to be a few months before I could come, which was rather unrealistic. And frankly, it took 2 years. In the meantime, I went on studying, and towards the end I wrote him every day. But then the problem
What took so long?
just clearing. First I had to apply for. Leo got a lawyer also through his uncle, and the lawyer said, "Well, you should not ask for immigration visa for me, because that takes forever. So ask for
A student.
a visitor's visa." And even that lasted half a year. And then as soon as I had it, I thought, no, I could, get a place on the ship. I couldn't get a place on the ship. And finally we decided to go on a British ship, I came on the Queen Mary and not on the Dutch ship.
But did you have how did you get your immigration
Going
status?
back a little bit, yeah. So it was time for me to immigrate.
You want some water?
I'm okay. So the same lawyer taught me how to do it. I had to go to Canada and then get my papers and come back. I had to go to a place called St. John in the country of New Brunswick. Sort of confusing. We lived in New Brunswick and there was a place in New Brunswick. It was January. I got my train ticket, but I thought I would need some money. I took $8.50 along, I think, 15 cents. So I got to the consulate or whatever it was, no, it wasn't, whatever, the authorities, and everything was okay, but I had to pay $8.30 tax. So I said, well, I have only $8.15. And I noticed there were people listening, suddenly starting writing, being very busy, afraid I would borrow 15 cents from them. So being very proud, I didn't listen. Right, do you think I could get 15 cents? Well, he said, out there is the vice consul of the Netherlands, try that. The snow was about this high, and I went through the snow to this man, and I wanted some extra money, so I asked for 30 cents instead of 15. And he said, well, you know, the other day a Dutchman came and asked for $2.50, the next day he stole a car. So I said, well, this is only 30 cents. I said, oh, all right. Much later I sent him a money order for 30 cents, and many years later I discovered I sent him the wrong stub. So,
What year was this, or when was this that you were trying to immigrate?
I think
46?
it must have been 46, end of 46,
End of
beginning of
46.
47.
Mm-hmm.
So now I had 15 cents left over, and I asked the authorities where I could get a cheap meal, and he said, well, the Salvation Army is out there, in other directions through the same snow. And I had to pay 10 cents for a cup of soup, so I had 5 cents left. No, I had 10 cents left, actually. So I figured that halfway the trip that we Boston, I could buy a 5-cent candy bar, and then would have 5 cents left over to call somebody, which would be Dr. Snapper's wife, my aunt, was a very sweet person. I got to New York and I called and she was not home. So now I had 0 cents, and I walked to a friend of mine in Rockefeller Plaza, who always gambled and borrowed from me, and I got money from him and got home. So that was my immigration.
And home at that point was New Brunswick, in New Jersey. Okay.
I'm sure I was not normal for the rest of that year. I mean, waiting for a clinic was extremely hard. But here came you want to tell how you came on the ship, maybe?
Well, finally, you know, I had my visa and I had my return. Well, I had to buy a return ticket, you know, because we would not want to advertise that I was going there planning to stay. And I still remember my father brought me to the train, and I still see him, you know, kind of walking fast.
Your father?
My father.
Was there then? Yeah.
And who's else father?
Yeah, but you said you sent. You wrote a letter from Indonesia.
Oh, but in the meantime,
Yeah,
he
he
had
had come
come
to-
to Holland.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. As a matter of fact, he was sick, and he got an early chance to go to
Ah, yeah.
But anyway, I can still see him walk, you know, next to the car, the train, and well, it was a ship that went from Hoek van Holland, I think, to, well, some place in England, and it was overnight, and you know, I always get seasick, and we teamed up with 2 very nice girls, and one had a cabin, and we all were in the cabin, and I slept on the floor because I said, well, you know, I may get seasick, so that was, but anyway, we finally came to Harwich, I think, and I was the mother of my British sister-in-law was waiting for me, and took me on a sightseeing tour of London while I was waiting for the train to the ship that would finally go to America. Anyway, on that ship, I was also sharing a cabin with an Italian lady with her daughter and a boyfriend, and they were the nicest people that I've ever met. We really had a good time, and the trip only took 4 days.
From England to New York.
Yeah, and I remember, we came into New York Harbor at night, so we couldn't see very much, and then we had to wait until the night was past to debark, and I had the official who was looking at my passport and gave me a very hard time. He said, why are you coming here? And I said, well, I have this offer to work for a while with an American doctor, Leo's boss. And he said, work. And it turned out that, when you're a visitor, you're not allowed to work. And I thought you had to work. So there was a little disagreement there. And finally he said, how are you getting there? And I said, well, my boss is sending somebody. Oh,
So then,
3 months and not a day more, he said.
Mm.
And that's under those conditions I picked up my microscope and my little suitcase. And
here I come in.
and
I was allowed, my same Dr. Snapper and his wife had the penthouse in Robinson Plaza Hotel, and they let me sleep overnight there, so I'd be at the ship early, and from that penthouse I could see the ship illuminated sitting with Tineke in it. Some other people too, of course.
Yeah.
So I think I got up at 6 in the morning and I went in the dark to the pier, and there was nothing there except a black cat which I picked up and petted a little bit. And finally people began to come off the ship and the gangplank. Many old ladies I was afraid were Tineke, but none of them were. Thank goodness. And finally I recognized her by the microscope, actually.
I was going to ask, because somebody who's gone through that much, and from being a teenager to a young woman, might change a lot in
Yeah.
6 years,
It wasn't that bad.
seven years.
I had gotten more
well,
walls and
we had exchanged some pictures,
Mm-hmm.
which were, most of them were very poor quality.
Were you? I
Obscene.
hesitate to ask, but were you nervous? Did you start getting more and more anxious
No,
through the
I was
trip? Or?
recovering from the interview, and I was very happy to get American soil under my feet.
well then
And there he was, but he was dressed in those days you had these summer suits. I don't know if you ever saw them. They had this ribbed
Seersucker.
seersucker.
Yeah.
You were wearing one of those,
I
and
didn't remember that.
that grayish blue, I think.
So of course
But the head was the same.
the
And
first thing
this was September 9th, 1947.
the first thing the head did was trying to kiss her and said, no, they're watching. And in retrospect it made a lot of sense because I was supposed to be just a guy.
Yeah, you were, some
Delegate.
delicate.
Yeah, but you didn't look like a tomato this time.
No, no, well, agreeing to me.
Well, we went
Said me,
to
"Sis."
pick up my real suitcase, and that was behind a lot of stacks of things, and then he could kiss me.
We took a taxi, I think, to the train, and I thought I had registered her suitcase, and I didn't have the ticket for it. I didn't know what it was. Anyway, we were a little tense, I think, on the train, all the way up to Rawway, around there, and we sat next to each other, and suddenly I think we held hands, and the past kind of disappeared.
It was very suddenly.
Yeah.
It was over.
And we looked at the fall flowers, the asters and goldenrod
Mm.
blooming. Well, we had a room,
But not a suitcase.
not a suite, we had one room in Highland Park, I guess, to start with. It was next to New Brunswick. And we went to work.
Well, we went to the hospital because I needed that blood sample, remember?
Oh, yes.
They used to require blood tests before
Yes,
people
we
got
had-
married, yeah.
We had a Canadian-born technician, Ed Turan, was a very nice guy. And he said, "Oh, I can take your blood. There's no problem. Just you know, I'll test it. I'll test it." He threw it on this thing without noticing it, and it came out negative. And then another technician, Mrs. Fritz, said she would take care of it, that we could get married the next day. And she stated that she knew Tineke from way back. So that
well,
was
there
no
was a
problem.
2-day waiting period, except when there was a witness that had known it. But we first had to pick up a license, and
So-
then we had to get a ring.
So I told her about Roger Smith.
You can, if in decent language.
Wow. Tineke had to stay somewhere that first night, and so the decent thing would be to put her up in a hotel Roger Smith in New Brunswick. And so we got this room, and I said, "Well, can I go up and say goodnight to her?" And she said, "No, you can't do that. Why don't you take a room for the both of you?" And I said, "Well," we looked at each other, I think, and said, "Fine." So we have two wedding dates. One was the 9th and the other was the 10th.
One is the reunion date, and one
Yes.
is the
Don't forget the breakfast.
The breakfast,
Consisted of
not in a hotel, but when we were in the room, the breakfast and next meal consisted of krentenbroodjes, these Dutch buns with, for instance, that she got from her mother to eat on her way to England.
well, these were known to be, they never spoiled,
No,
so we ate them.
with marmalade.
Frankly, we had other things to think about. And then I think you had a few days off, remember?
Yes, but that was our honeymoon. Consisted of walking in a park there. It was in Harrison
and
Park.
it was but you did get married the next afternoon.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Not only that, well, got married by a
Pastor.
what is the minister of the what church it was, in his home.
His office.
The witness, this same Canadian friend who did the so-called blood test, was going to be a witness, but he was a Catholic, and he was not allowed to witness a wedding in I forgot what the religion was. So we had an intern with blood on his jacket as one of the witnesses. I think the man's wife was one witness, and then there was a little dog, and Mrs. Fritz, of course. And we had to promise the minister that if we ever had any trouble, we should call him. Well, I guess he's dead now.
Well, he moved.
Talking about being...
Well, I think what you also should say, he used, of course, a religious ceremony, but he was very tactful and left most of the very religious parts out.
Yes. So now we were married. It was very interesting. We were not successful with these platelets and all that sort of stuff. And we thought we should see if they changed stickiness. We were very primitive in our thinking, or at least our boss was. I wasn't thinking at all. And I remember we were walking past a room where there were pipettes in the cleaning solution with glass wool on the bottom. And said, that's it, maximum surface, glass wool. If you pass blood through glass wool, you can see how many platelets stick. So we had to construct a kind of a wick, and you were wearing your hair in braids to begin with, and she thought of braiding the wicks, and we developed the unpublished platelet adhesiveness test. We thought it was. Now, understanding the Vroman effect a little bit, now we were actually testing the activity of high molecular weight kininogen.
Mm. So what? So you were working in the lab together, and living in
Poverty.
no, well, yeah, but you weren't being paid for what you were doing.
No, I was not allowed to be paid,
Yeah.
and so I worked for, I think, about 3 years, but they gave me meals.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big help.
And so how did the
Now we should talk about her immigration.
well, I was
Yeah.
just going to ask about that.
Mhm.
Can you tell the tragic story?
Which,
Well, the same lawyer and the same good uncle devised a way of getting Tineke across the border into Canada and then get her papers.
well, you have to add something. In those days, if you were already in the country and needed to immigrate,
Yeah.
you actually had to go through the motions. You had to leave the country and then come back. And then later they did away with that, and that was causing a lot of problems. And the lawyer said, well, you know, you just go on a visit to Canada, pick up your immigration and come back. Now it turned out,
Well, what I want to tell about Uncle Snapper's contribution. Uncle Snapper had a friend in Canada, is Dr. Best, who got the Nobel Prize for his work on insulin. And Dr. Best wrote us a letter that he was interested in our work and would like to see us. And
so yeah, we had to have an excuse to visit. So everything was fine, and we went on the train, and then after we had left Niagara Falls, the Canadian people came to look at our passports, and I still had my passport under my own name, and so, you know, first of all they said, you know, why didn't you have your married name? And so they were becoming very suspicious already. And then they said, well, what are you going to do? You don't have a valid visa.
and they actually said, not having a proof that you are married, you may have trouble coming back to the United States, unless you see a consulate. And then we said, well, frankly, that
We'll do that.
we are going to do that also. And then the man said, well, then you're trying to get in on a false pretenses. You have to go back to New York.
But they had, and I realized that only recently, they had the goodness to put us off the train on American soil, so I didn't have to pass.
Mm-hmm.
I was not already in Canada. In that case, he would have been deported. You
Mhm.
know.
Do you think that there was increased sort of suspicion of motives because there was such an influx of immigrants after the war?
It was something else.
Well,
What
that
it
too.
was really because they felt that we should have applied for permission, and our lawyer didn't want to do that because it's too much work, and he said this will work just as well. So the next time, we did apply for permission, for this particular.
So your first
purpose.
attempt didn't work. You had to start over again.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
it lasted another year almost.
Mm.
And
But you were on a visitor's visa. So how were you able to change that to allow you to stay in the country until you got immigration status?
we didn't change it. I just overstayed my permission, and I got letters from, you have to leave the country.
Mhm.
And the lawyer said, no, you don't have to do that as long as you are, working towards a official visa. And he said, but don't leave the country because you can't come back. And then later, when a similar thing happened with our cousin Hannah, he also told her, just stay in the country until it's all taken care of.
So what did you have to do then finally to get
Wait.
your immigration
Wait.
Wait.
Until
So you didn't have to go, you didn't go to Canada again?
Yes, he did. He had to finally apply, send an official request to allow me to come to Canada in order to pick up my visa.
To the Department of Mines
The Department of Mines.
Of mines?
in Canada, yeah.
Well, it was just they were angry at the lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And, there was nothing illegal, it was just something, that's just...
But that was, I think that was my question. Was the process made more difficult than...
I think you're right that they got more and more strict because they were getting sick and tired of people coming to Canada to immigrate.
Because your situation went quite smoothly, relatively smoothly
Yeah,
anyway.
I was still in uniform too.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the things that would probably have made a difference. Now, back to, when did you get a uniform?
Well, I was in uniform all the time.
But
Yeah,
when
it
you were...
It was the old American uniform that I got in Japan, and it became quite greasy and
Mhm.
stiff, but it was still.
But
the
it was
same
an
jacket.
American
Yeah.
soldier's uniform?
I was still officially in the Netherlands Indian Army
Mm-hmm.
when I went into Canada, and I think it was complicated. I would be automatically discharged as soon as I had my papers and come back as a
Civilian.
A
civilian.
private citizen, yeah. But they didn't, even though you were wearing an old American soldier's uniform, they didn't question that you were a Dutch citizen?
No, they questioned the smell of my uniform.
Yeah, but he had papers. You
Yeah.
were
Oh, yeah.
officially discharged from the army in Manila, right?
No, as I said, I was officially allowed to
Mhm.
to leave, but my discharge papers were based upon immigrating.
So you're basically, though, the immigration process was probably easier for people who were had been in the
Yeah.
military, as opposed to somebody who, in their understanding, was just trying to sneak back in.
I should add a few little notes on that time when we can still do that. When we arrived in New York, the Army gave us $25 and treated us to a dinner.
The Dutch army.
Yes, and then we got a letter before the rest of the bunch left for Holland, that this was a mistake. They had to return the $25, and the dinner was $1.01. So I went to their office to complain. Where would you get it from? Oh, I said, I'm sorry, that was a mistake. I got out his pen and said that should be $1.10.
What
And
did you
I
think?
think I lost that letter. I'm very sorry about that.
Mm.
Then another thing we did is we bought things in a duffel bag to take to Holland, and so mine was taken home by another fellow prisoner, and it contained, and had his advice, 2 corsets, because he said all the women, because of the war, are out of shape in Holland.
And the thing was, the out of shape was we were very thin,
Mm.
and she thought we had eaten the wrong food and had turned very fat. And we never wore them, of course. But you also sent 2 raincoats, and I've worn those for years and years and years.
Yeah. Well, so we're at the point where you both have your immigration status straightened out, and let's just take a break at that point. Okay?
Yep.